Welcome to a new video in my channel, and today is going to be another unusual review or an unusual content, which actually was triggered by another unusual content. A couple of weeks ago I made a video on my action cameras and how I use them, and I was also talking about the newest one, which is a GoPro Hero 9. And then just after a couple of days the video was released, InKee has contacted me if I'm interested in a gimbal, and this is their InKee Falcon Plus gimbal, which is specifically designed for GoPros. And I've never used the gimbal before, and actually I was interested in, how that is different to, some of the functions that I built into, like stabilization functions that are built into the GoPro. So this is what I want to talk about today, and also create a review video. I mean, I'm not an expert in, gimbals and everything, but I've used it for a couple of weeks, and I think I understand the keys that make it really, really good. And just to tie in with some of my other content, for example, trains, I think I created a couple of good footages that I can show you how it really makes making some great shots about model trains really, really easy. So first of all, as I said, this is called the InKee Falcon Plus, and this is specifically designed for GoPro. Obviously, it has a mount which can accept a GoPro, and they have a different model which is more suited for cameras, mobile phones. Besides the fact that it has this functionality, it goes to standby from time to time. It also has some GoPro integration. So for example, what you can see here on the side is I have a couple of buttons, and I can change between different modes on the GoPro. So at the moment I can, I just stopped the recording, I can go into the photo mode, or if I press the other button, I can go into a time-lapse mode. And of course, if I want to take a photo, for example, here I just press the button and it takes a photo. Which is nice. I can also use the functions here to turn the camera on and off. So let me just wake up from sleep again, and if I shut down the camera, the gimbal, it shuts down the camera as well. So that's actually quite nice, and it works the other way around as well. So this is the first test where I'm just using the GoPro without any of the special features turned on, and I'm trying my best to follow the loco. As you can see, I'm stepping. So obviously when you step, the camera bounces up and down, although I think I'm doing a really good job here. But this is what you can get with a sort of like a handheld footage. I think it's not bad. And you also, here I need to clear the hoses and everything, so it's a little bit more tricky. I'm moving the camera up and down, and also I'm leaning forward in order to record as the loco, or as the train pulls away. Yeah, it's not bad. Of course, if the train would be quicker and you have to follow, then it could be worse. So this is now the same thing with the boost mode on, which is supposed to even out some of the movements. And I think I would say that it is a little bit better, but I mean it's really just a little bit better because I think I was doing a decent effort anyway, and it's the same footage, or sort of the same setting as before. Again, I'm just holding the camera, and it's fine. And then you can see that probably you can see the few steps here. And so this is the pan follow mode, and I'm holding the gimbal, sort of holding it forward, and I'm trying to follow the loco. And yeah, I think you can probably tell that it is much smoother now. You can't really see when I'm taking some steps. And this one is going to be a little bit different because with the pan mode, it's going to keep the camera horizontal. So I was shooting above the train, but then it goes, pretty much level, and it nicely follows the train. So now this is the pan and the tilt follow mode, where the camera is going to point up and down as I move it above the train. and it just makes it really easy to keep the loco in shot and now follow it from the from above. I think this looks really good. And also here, when I need to clear the hose and some of the obstacles, I think probably I can use it quite well here. So let's see. Yeah, it's also like almost like a flying shot. So I think that's nice. And this is just one more example. Maybe with this camera angle you can see a little bit better how I'm holding the camera as I'm moving it up and down. And of course it's much easier to do it with this really small GoPro rather than like a bigger camcorder. But I'm quite happy how this footage turned out. Maybe I could have lowered the camera a little bit more here. And again, it's the same mode. I changed my grip on the handle, so I'm pointing the GoPro a little bit more down. Not that it really makes a difference for the gimbal, because it's anyway going to stabilize the the various axes. It looks like I have a smudge on the lens, but it looks good. It nicely follows. There is you don't see obvious movements. Maybe here you can see obviously not so much how I step, but I lean forward and backwards, then you can see that I get closer and further away from the camera or from the train, which is I mean, that's obvious. You can't really do anything about that. The gimbal is not going to go back and forth, so it's all good. And there is one thing I forgot to mention, which is how important it is to balance the camera on the gimbal. And actually I recorded all of my other footage without the camera being balanced. And then you probably noticed in a few occasions that the gimbal goes to standby. And if it happens with you as well, this could be the reason why the camera does that. Sorry, the gimbal does that, because it takes so much more effort for the motors to balance the camera if the camera is off balance or the weight is off balance. So there is an excellent, very short video how to do that. So I'm just going to overlay it here because it's much easier to follow that. As you can see now, as opposed to my other pictures, the camera sits further away from this motor, and also it is further up from this end position where it was as I unpacked it. So this seems to be a a good position for my GoPro Hero. And as you can see, if I leave the camera like this or in this position, and if I just let it go, it is not powered up at the moment, it's not going to change. So I mean, like, it's not going to fall like that or that, which is the indication that it is properly balanced in both of the axes. So this is something that you should definitely do if you are using the camera for the first time, or if you are putting some accessories on the camera so it changes the center of mass. And also I would like to point out that with this new setup and everything is balanced, I was placing this gimbal, I was turning on the gimbal, I was placing the camera something like this, and I left it there for about an hour and it didn't go into standby. So you can really use this gimbal just to hold the camera onto like a certain angle and just leave it like that. Instead of some kind of camera holder, you can just use your gimbal to leave it on any other position, because once the camera itself is stabilized, it doesn't take much effort for the gimbal to hold in a fixed position anyway, so battery virtually is going to last forever. And of course, the whole thing about a gimbal, is that it's going to keep your shots steady. So it has a couple of different modes, but in this mode, this is the pan follow mode. So when you pan the camera, it's going to follow wherever you are panning the camera. But if you tilt and roll the camera, it's going to keep the camera fixed. And of course the video is not going to be perfectly fixed because there are some physical limits. I mean, how much movement it can compensate, but the real thing is that if you are holding this gimbal and you are walking with a camera, it should be able to compensate most of the motion. And for example, your recording is not going to be shaky as you are walking, and of course, as you move the camera, even if you pan, it's sort of like As you can see, it cancels out some of the very quick motions and then creates like a smoothing motion between the different positions as you hold the handle. And whenever you turn on the gimbal and the camera, then it's going to go into a certain orientation, like sort of like a default position. And of course you can change that. So if you're holding the camera like that, or sorry, if you're holding the gimbal like that and you want the camera to show the horizon, then of course you can use these buttons. But if you want to realign sort of like the default position of the camera, you can always just move it and then just leave it for that in that position. I mean, of course, initially the gimbal will try to fight your movement, but then it would remember that or realize that you want to move it, and it's going to stay in that position. So if I do that, now it stays in that position, and if I move the gimbal now, it will keep that position. So it makes it really easy to basically align and set the default position. Because of course, when you're using the screws to mount this camera, then you won't be able to put it into the exact same position every single time. But then after that, it works fairly easy. And by the way, as I said, it works with the GoPro. And if I show you the box, it is designed for various different types of GoPros. And there is enough space on the gimbal that you can use the GoPro with the media mode, which I don't have. So this is an extra jacket which contains light and also like an external microphone, which would be able to fit here, but I don't have it. So you can still use this gimbal even if you just have the simple GoPro and without any of the additional bits and pieces. And since I was showing the box, let me just cover the unboxing. So the whole kit comes in this box. As you can see, this is the Falcon Plus. There are a couple of Chinese and the mixed Chinese and English writings on the box, and you can see the main specs here. It says in the English, it says long hour battery life, and then in the Chinese there is a 9. So I don't know, maybe there is a 9-hour battery on this one. I'm not really sure. I haven't used that long extensively in order to tell. And probably you can also tell in the videos that if you are just leaving it on the stand, then it will recognize that there is no movement and it's going to go into sleep mode. So you can't just test the battery by just leaving the camera running, because it would just go into sleep mode. I don't know whether it goes into sleep mode depending on whether the one of the motors are overheating. That could be one more reason why you can't leave it in that position. I mean, I just use it occasionally and I haven't noticed the battery being drained. And of course you can check the battery level as well. So, on occasional use, I haven't seen this, draining the battery quite much. And of course you have, there is a vertical shooting mode I haven't talked about, and the time-lapse shooting, and that's basically just using the functions of the GoPro. And there is wireless control, so you can see that it talks to the GoPro wirelessly. There is also an app, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but that app doesn't give you an awful lot. It has a couple of settings that could be easier to set on the app, and that's the main purpose. And of course updating the firmware, because we are in the 21st century, so you need to update the firmware. And you can see the various bits and pieces here as well, but I'm just going to point them out. So of course you have the gimbal, which is in standby mode, so it's like a little bit floppy at the moment, and then the GoPro on it, and that's the stand which screws on, so that's the standard screw mount. So you can leave it out. You are also getting a carry case for that. This carry case doesn't fit with the stand, so here it fits everything. And then if you're using the stand, it's going to stick out, or you just need to unscrew it every single time. And as you can see it here, there are a couple of bits and pieces available, provided in a bag. So there is a micro USB lead for charging, but you can just use any micro USB. And there are a few other screws. Let me just unbox it off camera. And so there is a replacement Allen key or Allen screw. There are 2 Allen keys. There is one more screw, I think it's the same size, and there is this GoPro mount or GoPro tile screw. And the way the whole thing is getting secured, let me just move this out of the way, and this is why you need the Allen keys, is so as you can see, you have a screw here which holds the GoPro onto the gimbal, and it uses the standard GoPro mounts. And you can also use this one, which would make it easier to disassemble. But then if you are using this one, it's going to catch on one of the motors. I think it would catch on this motor on some extreme movements. So actually, it might be just easier to use this one other than that, because you can easily unscrew this manually. You don't need the Allen key, but for this one, you need the Allen key. So that's one thing that you should consider. And there are two smaller screws here, and also there is one here. And these are just the adjustment screws. So if you have the GoPro, maybe if you have the media kit or some other kit, then you should be able to move these around in order to align the camera so it is in a center position, sort of like the, in a weight center. So the motors have to work less to balance the camera. But this is clearly explained in the documentation. And I don't have the documentation here. There is a very short documentation in a couple of languages, which only talks about the very, very basics. So the best is that you go online and you download the online documentation, because that talks a lot more about the features and different things this camera can offer. Since I'm talking about installation and everything, I just want to point out that on a standard GoPro, this is where you have the USB charging port under a flap, and also the USB, which means that on the standard GoPro, if you want to get to the SD card or if you want to charge the GoPro, you have to remove it from the gimbal, because otherwise you won't be able to, you won't have access to the flap and also the charging port. And this is why it is great if you happen to have the media mode, because the new case for the media mode, which means that you have the USB port here, so you have access to that. And if you have this media mode that you can also see here in this picture, the other big advantage is that you can connect the GoPro to this USB port, and your gimbal would be able to reverse charge your GoPro. So you can use the battery in the gimbal to charge the GoPro, just to give it some extra juice. So that's definitely nice. As I said, I can't really use it because I don't have access to the USB-C port. I thought maybe I can get a right angle USB port, USB-C connection, or a cable. But again, then I need to open up the flap, and there is simply not enough space here to do that. So that's, I guess maybe that's just the design choice or a limitation from their part. So let me talk about the controls here. So this is the main control surface, where you have this a four-way button to control the camera or the different motors. You have the on-off button, and this is the mode button. You have a couple of icons here. So for example, if I press the button once, then you can see that it shows the battery voltage. So at the moment it's like only the last one is flashing, so it means like between 75 and 100%. And if I long press it, then the whole camera, the gimbal turns on. And also if I long press it again, then the gimbal turns off. So let me just show you this one. So this turns on the gimbal, and at the moment the GoPro is off. No, actually turned on the GoPro as well, because the other icon here, the green one, shows that it is connected to the GoPro. And I would say probably this is the most important feature of this whole thing, because it makes using the GoPro so much easier. And in order to get to this one, I had to do a little bit of a trick, because it looks like that the documentation is made with an older style GoPro, so the menus have changed a little bit, but there is a video how you do this, the linking. So I'm just going to overlay it here. You just need a couple of different button presses. But once you do that, the gimbal is going to remember that, and it will work with the GoPro all the time. So that's obviously nice. And so those are the front controls. On the side controls, as I showed, you have the different mode buttons to switch between the various modes. And also here you have a trigger button. So the basic operation is that you use these buttons to change between the different modes. So I change the photo mode back to video mode, and then if I press it, then it starts the recording. And if I press it again, then it stops the recording. So that's nice. As I said previously, you can use these buttons to move the camera, to set up the position, and of course that works between recording and without recording. And for example, you can change the speed of this button in the app, but only in the app. So I'm just using the default one, but if you want this to pan faster or slower, you can change it in the app. And even if the gimbal is working, you can still use this button to check the battery level. And if you want the gimbal to go to standby mode, which it just did, you can do double presses. And and once it's in standby mode, you can just wake it up with a single press, and then it goes back to sort of like the default position again. And again, if you want to do this standby, you can just put it to standby like that. So that's easy. And finally, you have the well, I'm not talking about the mode, just a little bit later. And you have this trigger button as well. And the other function of this trigger button is that if I hold it, so as you can see, the camera is now following my movement, but if I click it, then it displays all these buttons, and then now it fixes the camera on all three axes. So this can be used if you want to rearrange your grip. So maybe you want to hold it like that and you let it go, and now it goes back to the original mode, and then it follows your motion. So I think that's actually good. So now I want to hold the camera like this. So I push the trigger button, hold it, and then I can, reapply it. It also has two more modes. If I double click it, it will return the camera to the original position. And if I 3 times click it, which is, I think it's a little bit hard to do, 1, 2, 3. No, 1, 2, 3. Then it does a 360, sorry, 360. It does a 180. So you can record yourself, and then with the 3 additional clicks. Okay, so this doesn't work all the time, or maybe the way it is sensing the 3 clicks is a little bit sensitive. So it definitely works like, turning it around, but also I managed to get it to turn back as well. So I don't know if you are recording something and all of a sudden you want to talk into the camera, you click 3 times and it does a 180. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to use that much. So yeah, that's one more feature which is sort of like, okay, it's fine. I can use it. And as I said, if you want to realign the sort of like the default position at any point, then you can just move the camera, leave it like that, and it would remember, and now it will keep that position in the gimbal. So that's again, I think that's a nice feature, because it's much easier to do the camera like this instead of using these buttons, which I would always prefer to do. But let me talk about the various modes. So the first mode is the PF mode, where PF as in pan follow, which means that it's going to keep these 2 motors it's going to stabilize these 2 motors, which means that the horizon and the tilt of the camera is going to remain the same, but as I pan, it's going to follow my movement. So as you can see, the camera always points straight in this direction, but then it follows my movement. And again, it goes into standby mode. The next mode is the LH mode, which is going to follow my pan and also the tilt, which means that if I pan, the camera is going to follow my pan. And if I look up, then the camera is going to point up. And if I look down, the camera is going to point down. So the difference between this mode and the last mode is not going to keep the horizon anymore. And if you go into the last mode, which is the follow mode, then basically it follows the camera in all axes. So you can always pan, you can also tilt, and if you, and if you sort of, I think this is the roll, then the camera is going to follow the roll as well. I think probably this is the mode which is going to get used less, because primarily you want to keep your recordings horizontal. But you can do that, and basically what the gimbal does in this position or this mode is that it's going to just even out the 2 fast motions. So as you can see, whatever I do, the gimbal is going to follow that, but the way the camera responds to the movement is going to be more of an evened out movement, as opposed to my sort of jerky movement as I try to jiggle the gimbal around. So that could be nice as well if you have a little bit shaky hand, or for some reason your recordings are a little bit shaky, but still it allows you to point the camera into every single direction, and the gimbal is just going to follow that. So I think my preferred modes are probably going to be the PH mode or the pan mode, because I really like to keep the camera on level, and this really allows me to do that. And also, even if I tilt it like this, it's going to keep the camera level. And then finally, the last mode, which I think I'm never going to use this, if you point the camera forward and you press the mode button twice, then it goes into horizontal mode. But we are not using TikTok, so we are not going to use that. And if you click it again, then it goes into a flashlight mode, which is like more like a fixed mode in vertical. And if you click again, then it goes back to horizontal mode. So I think with these, probably we have covered all the different modes and all the different button combination these gimbal provides. And this concludes my review of this InKee Falcon Plus gimbal. If you are interested in this product, you're going to find purchasing links in the video description. But that would be all for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video.